Fine. So yesterday we were discussing about how three-way handshake happens, and I will explain it again to start today's class, and then we will continue to. So there are three parts of a connection. One is three-way handshake to set up the connection, start the connection, then way to close the connection, which also is kind of similar to three-way handshake, but well, it has more complications, okay, as we will see. And the third is the regular data transfer that happens in between the first connection request and the end connection release. These two phases. Okay, so all these three phases we will study one after the other. First, start with connection initialization or connection, how the connection is set up. Suppose host 1, which can be any computer, wants to set up a transport layer connection with host 2. It sends a special segment called a connection request segment shown by CR, and it proposes its own initial sequence number for this segment. Every segment will have an identifier sequence number, and host 1 in this case proposes X is its initial sequence number. X may be 0, may not be 0. What is X? We will come to that. Host 2, when it successfully receives the connection request after some interval of time, if it is okay to start the connection, it starts the connection and it sends back a acknowledgement segment called an acknowledgement segment back to host 1. This initial acknowledgement segment does not contain any data, any important data. This is just to acknowledge that yes, I am okay with the connection. In this acknowledgement segment, there are several fields, but two important fields are sequence field and an acknowledgement field. Please try to understand. I think there was some confusion in yesterday's class. Many students were not understanding what is a sequence field. The sequence field is dependent on the party which is sending it. So the sequence field is sender specific, whereas the acknowledgement field is recipient specific. Okay, so when host 2 sends the acknowledgement segment, host 2 is the sender, so it proposes its initial sequence number Y, which is going to be the next segment number. So in this chapter, we will interchange between these two conventions, that current sequence number and next sequence number. Here mostly next sequence number is used, so let us consider next sequence number. TCP uses next expected sequence number as the acknowledgement field, and in this acknowledgement pack segment, it is saying that I will start my sequence number starting at Y. Again, how did host 2 decide that Y is its starting sequence number? We will come to that. There is an algorithm for this or scheme for this. And it says that I am okay with your initial sequence number X. This is very important. This thing was not there earlier in the schemes that we were simple schemes we were seeing, and we are proposing that all of them have some problem, that there can be an old segment, how to identify an old segment, etc., etc. This additional field of acknowledging that I am okay with your proposed sequence number helps to solve all these problems. Finally, host 1, when it receives the acknowledgement segment, it knows that host 2 is ready to now accept data. It starts sending data. So the first data segment it sends as it had proposed at starting sequence number X. The first data segment also has a sequence number X, and in the same data segment it kind of, what should I say, it superimposes or piggybacks an acknowledgement field saying that I am okay with your starting sequence number Y by saying that the next data segment you send me will have sequence number Y. I'm expecting a data segment with sequence number Y from you next. This is the meaning of this data segment values. So when host 2 successfully receives this data segment, if it sends its first data segment after this, then it sends a data segment, okay, where the sequence number will be Y, because now host 2 becomes the sender. And the acknowledgement number will contain the expected segment number next from host 1, which is X plus 1. So next data segment that host 2 sends will be kind of this. Let me just write it something like, it will be something like this. Don't get confused by acknowledgement field and acknowledgement segment. These two are different concepts. The acknowledgement field is there in every segment that is sent, whereas the ACK segment is a special type of segment which acknowledges a initial connection request. Okay, so this will be kind of the last data segment of the first data segment that H2 will send to H1. Great. Now let's see how does this scheme help to solve problems, old duplicate problems. When there are old duplicates of the same packets roaming about in the network between host 1 and host 2 somewhere, and they suddenly arrive at the one of the hosts, does it confuse that host or the other host? Does it create any problem? Suppose the connection request segment old duplicate means connection request segment had earlier already been received by host 2, but again from somewhere it crops up a copy of that and reaches host 2. The question is, will a new connection starts? That is not yet certain because host 2 does not know. But host 2, what it does is because host 2 does not remember everything about host 1 sequence number. This is something that you have to understand. The receiver does not remember everything about the other host sequence number except only the current running connection. If there is a live connection between these two hosts, it knows what is the next expected segment number. But otherwise, why is host 1 proposing to start a connection with sequence number X? Host 2 has no idea. However, when it receives a connection request later on, by that time probably the old connection has closed down, okay, which had initially which had CR sequence equal to X, this kind of a thing. That has already closed down, but again it receives the old duplicate. It says, okay, fine, I don't know, maybe here is starting a new connection. So it sends back an acknowledgement packet as usual, proposing its own sequence number. Now suddenly, when host 1 receives this acknowledgement packet with its acknowledgement field set to X, host 1 gets alert. Host 1 says, well, I have not proposed anything in the recent past to start a connection with host 2 with initial sequence number X. Then why is host 2 acknowledging something with X value? That must be an old packet that was roaming about in the network which has confused host 2. So I will not start a connection, and it sends a reject packet back to host 2 saying, no, don't start this connection. So this half open connection between host 1 and host 2, which host 2 had opened at this point, this was a half open connection because the other party had not yet opened the connection, right? for successful data transfer. This connection, after it receives, host 2 receives the reject packet, it closes down. Okay. Now please understand what helped host 1 in recognizing this erroneous condition was the presence of this ACK equal to X field. Host 1 did not know anything about the error condition by noticing the sequence equal to Y field, because that is host 2's field. Host 2 can propose anything, any starting sequence number. That host 1 has no control over that. But what host 1 has control is its own current sequence number and its own state of live connections with other hosts. That it knows. That whether in the recent past it has proposed a new connection with sequence number X. When it finds no, it has not proposed, but still something is coming back, it sends a reject packet. Okay. Now here both second is connection request and acknowledgement, both are delayed duplicates. So it's, well, I shouldn't say acknowledgement, but say connection request and acknowledgement means acknowledgement field of and data packet. Okay, that is an old duplicate basically. So again, as usual, connection request is an old duplicate. This thing is sent. Now after some time, another data packet with sequence number X. Okay. But acknowledgement number different Z reaches host 2. Okay. Then what does host 2 understand? Host 2 understands that, well, see, sequence number X is possible because just now I had sent an acknowledgement packet saying that I am okay with your initial sequence number X. Okay, so sequence number X is possible from host 1. But why the hell is some packet coming to me from host 1 with acknowledgement equal to Z? Host 1 should have acknowledged Y because I proposed Y. Recently I have just proposed Y. Why is it proposing Z? That means something must be wrong with this data packet. And it does not accept this data packet and closes the connection. That has not been shown in this diagram, but that is basically what happens. In the meantime, when the acknowledgement request reaches host 1, okay, host 1 also does not get fooled because of the previous situation. Okay, host 1 says, why suddenly I am getting an acknowledgement equal to X acknowledgement segment from host 2. I have not proposed anything recently to host 2, a new connection with acknowledgement equal to X. That means this must be a response to an old duplicate by host 2. So it sends an explicit reject packet to host 2 saying this is the reject packet corresponding to your proposed initial segment Y. I'm responding to your message and I am rejecting the connection. We will not start the connection. So both parties basically kind of, host 2 need not close the connection right. It need not close the connection at this point. It doesn't actually close the connection right now at this point, but it does not accept the data packet. If it closes the connection, that might be problematic because there might be other data packets also coming in and there might be an old duplicate data packet just roaming about in the network which has reached out of order. So it doesn't close the connection, but it does not accept the data packet. It is possible that you will reject a data packet without closing a connection. That is possible. Okay, we'll see in TCP it will happen all the time. No, I mean we'll see very soon actually. Okay, but after receiving the explicit reject message, in this case, it will close the connection, saying that, well, other party is rejecting to start the connection. Is this clear, students? I don't think any textbook or any resource available will explain this in greater detail than what I have just now said. Did you understand what I told? Any confusion? Please clear your confusion because I know these are slightly difficult topics. Anybody has any question? You will get used to, you will get a feel of it as you go along, okay? So those of you who are in this computer architecture lab in the last semester, I told you that with Verilog, you need a little bit of practice. Once you get practice, you will get a feel of what is happening, and then you can write the correct code by yourself. So it will take some time, but you will get used to it.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
So, sir, if like host 2 is not willing to send data, like it is a one-way connection kind of thing, then how the diagram will be proceed? Like host 1 is only sending the data.
Yeah,
I
that is
mean,
okay. So the data arrows will be only from host 1. In this case, data arrows will be only from host 1. Host 2 will send back data. It will also send back something which will look like data type segments, but actually the data type segment, the data fields will be empty, but it will contain the sequence number and acknowledgement number fields. Actually, later on, you will find that the data type segments are the most generic segments. Okay. So those segments basically host 2 will send back. It will acknowledge every successfully received data packet, even if it does not have to send any data back to host 1, it will acknowledge that I have received something from you. That's the way TCP works. That's the way TCP ensures that in spite of having an unreliable layer below it, TCP itself is reliable. The transport layer itself is reliable. Again, go back to this diagram. Okay. The diagram of what transport layer services promise to provide and what it has below it. Okay. The below layer is datagram delivery. In the network layer, it is unreliable. But TCP has made these great promises, reliable data delivery, ordered packet delivery, etc. To keep this promise, it must acknowledge every successfully received packet back to the sender. So that makes TCP slightly slow, but very soon we will find uh, situations how to make it faster. So in this case, it will send back something like a data segment with the data field empty. That is possible, but with the other fields filled in. There are lots of fields in a TCP segment. When we study TCP later on, we will find there are many fields. Okay, does that answer your query?
yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Abhijit? Okay, fine. Now, or how does this magical numbers X, Y, etc. are chosen? Okay, so what Tomlinson proposed is something called self-clocking. It is actually used, a version of it is used in TCP. I shouldn't say exactly this is used in TCP, but similar thing is used in TCP. So self-clocking says that generate sequence number based on clock tick values. What is a clock tick? Okay, clock tick is kind of your system clock, how whatever way you want to discretize your measurement of time. It can be second, it can be your system clock, it can be in terms of amount of time that you decide to be the inter-packet transmission duration, that is one clock tick, whatever. Okay. Then you use a formula. You have to ensure that the sequence number do not wrap around too quickly. So have sufficient number of bits to denote the sequence numbers. Okay, maybe 32 bits to denote sequence numbers. So maximum you will have like 2 power 32 segments before which it turns around, wraps around. And why is this important? This is important by the time the sequence numbers wrap around, sequence number will wrap around. Okay, I mentioned it in the yesterday's class. If you are using finite number of bits, 32, 64, 128, whatever, just to denote sequence numbers, these are these are large. This will allow a large range of sequence numbers, but eventually it will wrap around. That's the rule of the game. Okay. And if your starting sequence number is towards the end of the range, say your range is from between 0 and just I'm giving a rough example, 0 and 1023. Okay, say 10-bit sequence number, and your starting sequence number is 1000. Then of course after 23 packets it will 24 packets it will wrap around. So there is not much you can do about it. But on average it should be large so that the chances of wrapping around very quickly is minimized. Okay. So Tomlinson proposed that the initial sequence number should be some V mod C multiplied by M divided by C in integers, where V is the value of the time of day clock. For example, seconds elapsed till midnight, this type of thing. C is the sequence cycle time, which should have the same unit as V. M is the maximum sequence number allowed, and M has to be greater than equal to yeah. So in this way, you can do something. TCP uses are actually a simpler formula, probably. But what TCP does is, in addition, it adds a random number with this. You don't need to fully like memorize all this formula. I'm just saying this is a historical thing that he proposed. TCP basically uses its own clock, the system's clock, to generate a sequence number. Okay, using some sort of a scheme, and it adds a random value to it. That's an additional thing that TCP does to further randomize the starting sequence number. Okay, because one server will maybe our one party might start multiple connections in very short duration with different parties. So all of these new connections will require new segment numbers. Okay. Now, as I said that we do not remember sequence number at the receiver, you only remember your own sequence number and only the next expected sequence number from the sender. That is the other party. That is the only thing that you remember. No history of what sequence numbers the other sender had used, all these things, nothing is required. This scheme works under a very important assumption, which is not stated on this slide. I will state it. The assumption is that even if your system crashes, the system clock is working. Unless that happens, please remember that yesterday we were studying schemes that some system crashed and then again it woke up with certain values. It needed to decide, okay, that these are safe starting values, either from a very high value or from a very low value, depending on the danger zone of which is defined by the expected packet lifetime. How will it know what is a safe starting value? It has to know what was the last value at which the system crashed. Okay, either a very high value or a very low value. These again has to be rebooted. There is a hardware system clock which keeps on running. And this is actually true in all modern computers. All of them, there is a clock, system clock, which has an additional backup power source like a battery or so, which keeps the system clock running, so that even if you switch off your laptop, power off your laptop and then switch it on after 2 days, you find that it is perfectly synchronized with the clock. You get into trouble if you have kept your power, say laptop, disconnected from power for maybe 1 year, then you switch it on then it's a problem, because by that time the inbuilt battery, backup battery, which was providing power to your system clock has run out. And again, it needs to get charged to provide power to this thing. Then you need to set your system clock, etc. Okay. So this is one very, very important assumption, that for this scheme of initial sequence numbers to work, essentially you look at a current time, develop a modulo arithmetic mechanism to generate a number which is going to be your initial sequence number, and then you maybe add a random value to it. Okay, TCP probably does add a random value to it to make it further randomized. That's it. Now let's come to connection release. Okay, connection release in this transport segment things in a reliable way is notoriously difficult. In fact, it is impossible, as we will see very soon. Please pay attention to this. Okay, I know it is a chilly morning and many of you are sleepy, still not fully booted actually, but please pay attention, because this is something which is very peculiar, and this is based on my experience of teaching this material to previous batches of students. This is something which the students do not understand fully at the beginning. I mean, first, like, it takes some time for them to understand. The question is, how will you end a connection? Very simple question. When we talk about telephone, how do you end a connection? We say, okay, I'm done. Okay, I'm done. Let us disconnect. Bye with your friend. Then you at your own pleasure disconnect, and your friend at your own pleasure disconnect. It is completely asymmetric release. Means nobody has any coordination about the exact time at which each will disconnect. There can be even more drastic situations where your friend might disconnect at any point of the call without telling you anything. So these are all situations of asymmetric release. You try to coordinate the disconnect at the end of the conversation, but it doesn't actually work in practice in a coordinated way. Okay. We will try to see whether symmetric release is first possible in computer network connections. Okay. Then we will find that, well, it is not possible. We have to go for asymmetric release, like the telephone release, as I said. Why? That is the next few slides will explain. That why is this unfortunate situation that a very elegant handshaking to end a connection does not work. Okay, so please pay attention. How do you know when to finish? Well, firstly, one way is each process knows how much data they will send. One process sends the data, other process sends the data, complete data has been sent and complete data has been received. It knows there is no need for the connection any further, and they disconnect. Both sides disconnect their side of the connection. Both parties disconnect. This is an ideal situation. No computer network works like this in practice. Nobody knows how much data is going to come from the other side, from either side, from host 1 to host 2 or from host 2 to host 1. Nobody knows. So of this scheme that each process has a fixed amount of data, that doesn't work. Now let's see if we treat the connection as two separate unidirectional connections. Okay, and each will be released separately. That is what it actually it must happen. That's the way it happens. Symmetric release, whether it works. What is symmetric release? Host 1 says I am done. Are you done? Host 2 says I am done too. Goodbye. So perfect coordination, and each side disconnects. Very nice. This is kind of the nice telephonic disconnection. Okay. Each side independently disconnects, but before that they say goodbye to each other. Now let's see whether it works in a computer network. To understand this, we have to draw an analogy to something called a two-army problem. This is a very famous synchronization problem. The idea is something like this. There are two armies. Okay. There is a trench, a low valley kind of a region that is occupied by a white army. And there is a blue army, but the blue army is divided into two parts. The blue army is on the two other sides of the valley on two hills. Okay. The blue army individual halves is smaller than the white army. However, if you take the complete blue army together, it is larger than the white army, which basically means that if the blue armies together attack the white army, the blue army will overall win. But if the one of the halves of the blue army attack and the other half does not join the attack, the blue army will lose. So here from the picture you see the white army has 3 soldiers, but the blue army has 2 soldiers each. The question is, can blue army 1 and blue army 2, these two halves coordinate among themselves and attack the white army at the same time in the absence of any electronic communication, any modern communication, no email, no satellite phone, no walkie-talkie, no radio, no mobile phone, nothing? Is it possible? The only way in which blue army 1 and blue army 2 communicates with each other is via messengers, human messengers, who travel on foot from the starting point down this dangerous valley up to the other hill and then comes back to its own position and tells his commander that yes, I have successfully delivered the message. This is the only way for one half of the army to know that the message was successfully delivered. For example, say blue army 1 proposes, let's tomorrow attack together at 6 AM. So the messenger of blue army 1 will start. It will go down this valley. If he is lucky, he will reach the other side, because in the way he might be killed by white army. But if he is lucky, he will reach the other side. Blue army 2 will deliver the message. We will attack tomorrow at 6 AM. Suppose blue army 2 agrees. They say yes. Then he takes that acknowledgement yes and comes down the valley again and comes back to the blue army 1 and tells his commander, yes, they have agreed to the 6 AM attack, but whether he will be able to come back to blue army 1 is not known, because he might be killed on the way, on his way back. Which is exactly like our situation. Either the original message might get killed or lost on the way, or the acknowledgement might get killed back to the sender. So either of this can happen. Fine. Now let's see. Now another assumption is that all of the blue army people they are rational. Okay. They are rational people. They think rationally. If they think irrationally, then it's a different point. But we will assume they think intelligently and rationally. Now whether they can ever agree to attack under this. The point is no protocol exists to coordinate their attack. Let's see why. Suppose the messenger goes, delivers his message successfully and again comes down the valley and reaches the other side. Do you think blue army 2 will attack tomorrow at 6 AM? By the way, the two blue army halves cannot know whether the messenger reached the other side successfully. It is too far away. So they have no way of like looking through a binocular to see whether the messenger has reached the other side successfully. That is impossible. Now tell me, the Blue Army 2 had agreed to the messenger. Yes, we will attack at 6. But finally, will they take the risk rationally? Just think and tell me. What would you do? You suppose you are the commander of Blue Army 2. And you had a messenger from Blue Army 1 walk up to you, say that let's attack at 6. That time you said, okay, yes, I will attack, but finally, will you attack?
No, sir, because the Blue Army 2 does not have the confirmation that their confirmation leads Blue Army 1.
Exactly. Very good. Very good. So who was that? Who was just speaking just now? Shubham. Okay.
Sir, Shubham.
Great. So Shubham has the right answer. What he's saying is that Blue Army 2 does not have any confirmation that when they said yes and this guy started going back to his original army, whether he successfully reached his original army, because there is no further acknowledgement to acknowledgement. There is an acknowledgement from Blue Army 2, but whether that acknowledgement reached Blue Army 1, they don't know. And Blue Army 2 knows that without the acknowledgement successfully reaching Blue Army 1, Blue Army 1 will not attack at 6 in the morning tomorrow. So it will be risky for them to attack at 6 in the morning tomorrow. So they will not attack. Now, what about Blue Army 1? Suppose this messenger is lucky and it does come back to Blue Army 1 successfully, saying that yes, Blue Army 2 have agreed, we will attack at 6 AM tomorrow. Suppose one of you is a commander of Blue Army 1 now. Will you take the risk of attacking? What do you think? Is it risky? Or will you actually go ahead and attack? Because you have received, this time you have received the acknowledgement successfully. What do you think? You will attack or not attack?
Sir, not attack.
Why?
Because Blue Army 2 doesn't know that we have received the message. So they might be retracting. They won't be attacking. So why should we?
Yeah. So the thought process of Blue Army 1 is that Blue Army 2, first of all, Blue Army 2 thinks in exactly the way that I think, rationally. Okay, intelligently they think and analyze the risks. Blue Army 2, first point. Second point, Blue Army 2 has no way of knowing that my messenger has come back successfully to me. Since Blue Army 2 does not know that the acknowledgement was delivered back to me successfully, Blue Army 2 will probably not attack tomorrow at 8 AM. So I will also not attack tomorrow at 8 AM. So Blue Army 1, in spite of getting back the acknowledgement, will not attack. The problem is you can keep on increasing this. Okay, now I will send an acknowledgement to an acknowledgement. You can try setting up these more complicated protocols. Nothing will work in this case. Because the issue with this protocol is that what is happening to the last portion, the exact last step of the protocol is not known to both the parties. This is the problem. Okay. One of the steps of the protocol, the last step of the protocol, the result of that, whether it was successful or not, is not known to both the parties. One of the parties knows it is successful, but the other party will never know, has no way of knowing that whether it was successful or not. So this problem, two-army problem, has no solution theoretically. Exactly for the same reason, the connection disconnect request, okay, has no solution for a symmetric release case. For an asymmetric release, well, there is a solution, but it's not a perfect solution. So we will try to do something to improve it. But let's see what is asymmetric release. Asymmetric release is, say you are a school going kid in high school or 9th or 10th, like that. You are discussing with your friend, hey, today after tuition in the afternoon, let's go for a movie. Okay. You are talking with your friend from your room. Suddenly your father comes in and you suddenly hang up. So your friend had probably was going to say, yes, yeah, I agreed, but which movie should we go, like that, something he was going to say. But because you suddenly hung up, the data was lost. The information was lost. So this is asymmetric connection release and very, very, very abrupt, which led to data loss. So let's see what is connection release. Okay. So the asymmetric connection release is something like this, that host 2 was receiving data. Suddenly host 2 decides it will no longer receive data, and it just sends a single disconnect request packet segment, special segment, and hangs up. And if there was data on the way from host 1 about which host 2 does not really know that whether there are further data coming in, those data will probably arrive at host 2, but it will not be accepted because host 2 does not accept data after a disconnect request if it is that abrupt. So the moral of the story is, this is, well, symmetric release does not work because of the 2-army problem. Asymmetric release in this way is too abrupt. This is too much. I mean, this is very aggressive. So something has to be done. We will try to do some handshaking and let's see what happens. And that third scheme is basically what is used in practice. Something like this happens. There is a concept of a timer in transport layer connections. It is a very important concept. A timer keeps track of the time that has passed since a segment was released. If the segment lifetime, within this time it should come back, this estimate is, say, 30 seconds. If it does not come back within 30 seconds, the timer is initialized to 30 seconds and it counts down. For every segment, there is a timer. Okay, every segment. Okay, so of course, for every segment, it cannot be a hardware timer. So some software mechanism of timing. I mean, keeping the time. Now, if the packet does not come back or an acknowledgement to it does not come back within 30 seconds. So 30 seconds is said to be the round trip time. Round trip time means I start from one host, I go to a destination and acknowledgement to it comes back. This total time. So round trip. Say that is 30 seconds. If the counter counts down to 0 within 30 seconds, nothing happens. Then again it resends the packet. It again reinitializes the connection to 30 seconds and resends the packet. So this timer is used all the time in TCP, as we will see very soon in the data sending portion also. Okay. Now, disconnect request, suppose host 1 wants to actively disconnect a current connection. So host 1 sends a disconnect request packet, DR packet, to host 2. Okay, notice that this time there is, well, there can be some data in the last segment, but need not be. So just a disconnect request packet. Host 2, when it receives the packet, it sees that, okay, no problem if I release the connection. It also sends a disconnect request packet. And both the times when these disconnect request packets are sent by either party, okay, they start a timer. Okay. Now, in the first case that we are studying, the timer did not elapse. But before that, the response to it, one disconnect request has another disconnect request acknowledgement or another disconnect request, whatever you want to call this second packet. So before the timer had ended, it had got a message from the other side saying that, okay, it's okay to disconnect the connection. So it sends an acknowledgement saying that, yes, I have acknowledged your response to my disconnect request packet through your disconnect request packet. And it sends the acknowledgement and releases the connection, and host 2 also, after releasing this acknowledgement, releases the connection. So this acknowledgement tells host 2 that host 1 had received its disconnect request packet. So everything is perfect. This is what we want. Not everything is perfect because host 1 does not know that this ACK reached host 2 perfectly. Host 1 does not have any way of knowing. So it just trusts in God and says that, well, maybe this acknowledgement will reach host 2 perfectly. So after sending this, it probably waits for further some small time and then disconnects. So this is an kind of an asymmetric release, right? Because this part has the final act. This thing has no solution. You will not get anything further from host 2. Acknowledgement to acknowledgement will not come, as we have discussed. So this is the first case. This is what actually happens. So not very elegant solution. Well, yes, but what to do? The problem is that host 2, sometimes if this acknowledgement does not reach it ever, host 2 might kind of remain with a kind of a half open connection, basically. If it waits forever, that I will only disconnect after I receive this acknowledgement. But there is no guarantee that this acknowledgement will ever reach. Okay, so let's see what can be done about it. If the acknowledgement never reaches the host, it gets lost on the way. Remember, host 2, when it sent back its disconnect request reply to the initial disconnect request segment, it also started its own connection. When the timer times out, but still it has not received the acknowledgement segment, host 2 says, okay, I don't care what the hell, I will just release the connection. And it abruptly releases the connection. So in the interval where it started the timer and where this connection was finally released, it is kind of in a hanging state, basically. It is about to release the connection, but fully not released, waiting for an acknowledgement. So it waits for an acknowledgement, but if it doesn't come, it finally gives up. Now, if the response, so this case was acknowledgement, final acknowledgement was lost, then suppose the response to the initial disconnect request, which is another disconnect request acknowledgement, that is lost. Okay. If that is lost, the host 1 times out for its first disconnect request segment and again resends the disconnect request segment and again starts the timer. This time maybe it is lucky and it reaches the host 2. Host 2 sends back a disconnect request acknowledgement which reaches host 1. When it reaches host 1 releases the connection after sending an acknowledgement. I mean, these two events are kind of together. It happens, release connection and send acknowledgement. So it really sends an acknowledgement and releases the connection. And so when this reaches this peacefully, this host 2 releases. If it does not release, then it goes back to the previous case. Does not reach. Now, this is this is the most unfortunate case. First disconnect request reached the host 2, but subsequently all the response from host 2 was lost, and subsequently every repeated disconnect request that was sent from host 1 were all lost. Timeout, send the disconnect request again, start the timer, again it is lost. Timeout, again send the disconnect request. So my point is that this timeout and send DR, this thing keeps on repeating until it reaches gets a disconnect request response from host 2. But for how long will this happen? There is host 1 also has a limit of patience. Okay. So it sets a parameter, say n, it will maximum allow up to n timeouts. So if within n timeouts it does not get a response from host 2, it says what the hell, and it abruptly disconnects its own connection, releases. On the other hand, host 2 had received an initial disconnect request, but after that he did not hear anything from host 1. Okay. So this is the host 2 situation is kind of similar to many teachers actually. You know, at the beginning of semesters, students usually from second year onward, third year, fourth year, they would come and say, sir, I want to do a project with you independently, maybe linked to my BTP, maybe outside my BTP, an independent project just to enhance my CV, because maybe later on I want to apply for higher education abroad. Their publications would help. So that is the first request. So you respond to that, you give him some papers to read. But then there is no further, nothing you get to hear from the student. So after some time, the same semester ends, you give up. You understand that, well, this guy is gone. He's not coming back anymore. So host 2 also has a limit of the patience, so he gives up. He says that, okay, fine, I'll release the connection. So this is not at all elegant, but this is what is unfortunately happens in practice because of all the complications with symmetric release. Symmetric release is elegant but impractical. It cannot be implemented. Just one comment about the 2-army problem. If any of you plan to take or you are taking the distributed system course, you might be studying something called Byzantine agreement and Byzantine fault tolerance and this type of things. The 2-army problem has connections with the Byzantine agreement problem. Byzantine agreement is a classic problem in distributed computing. So the idea is something like this, that if there are several parties computing some value and some of them intentionally provide misinformation about the value. Okay, partial misinformation. Intentionally it lies about the result of the part of the computation that it is doing. Still whether the value can be correctly computed or not. So the results show that up to a certain limit on the number of layers, it can still be correctly computed. Okay, or consensus can still be reached about what is the correct value. Okay, up to a certain limit, not above that. If the number of layers go beyond that certain limit, it won't work. So this has got connections with Byzantine agreement. So maybe if you take distributed systems, or maybe you are taking, you will study this. Now, another thing is that remember that the transport layer has made a promise that it will provide error-free transfer of data between two transport layer entities. By the way, before I move to this, any questions about connection release? Students, anybody has any question? Because after this error control and flow control slide, we will move to the data flow, the third case. So we have covered connection setup and connection release. We will now go to the main part, which is about transfer of data between the parties, how that happens and what are the protocols. Any question before that?
Sir?
Yes.
Sir, the n value for multiple timeouts, is it fixed by the kernel?
Probably yes. I do not know whether it can be fixed by the user, whether there are API calls. I'll need to check. But possibility is some default value is used by the kernel, and maybe when you write your application, maybe you can overwrite it for your session. But whether it can be done globally for all future connections, I'm not sure. Maybe not. But for one session, maybe it can be overwritten using some API function calls. Again, I'm not sure about that. You have to check the manual. But usually this kind of things are said by the kernel. Yes. Any other question?
Sir, during connection establishment, what if the acknowledgement is lost in the way in response to connection request? What will happen then?
Release or establishment?
Establishment.
Okay, yeah, tell me.
So the middle acknowledgement is lost
Yes.
in the way. So what will happen? Host 2 will not know that the acknowledgement is lost, so it will not send it again.
It
And
will
host 1
send the CR again. CR sequence X again. Host 1 after timeout will send it again.
Okay.
Timeout mechanism has not been shown here, but that will also be here in this case also. Good question. So in the connection establishment, we have not shown any timeout mechanism, but that will be there for connection establishment also. So I think the question is that suppose this acknowledgement, first acknowledgement to the CR segment is lost from host 2. What will be host 1's action? Well, it will again request the CR segment. And host 2 will send back exactly the same ACK segment. Why? Because data transfer has still not started. Its expected value for the next segment from host 1 is still X. Because it has not received any data till now. It will just resend the same acknowledgement after it receives the same CR segment. It will note down that this is a CR segment is a repetition of the first CR segment, but that's okay. The CR segment cannot cause any harm to host 2 because there is an alive connection with host 1 whose starting sequence number is X. Host 2 will not treat this as a new connection request. It will treat this as a repetition of the current connection request. It will understand that this has happened because host 1 has probably not received its acknowledgement, so it will resend the acknowledgement. So more examples of this will be apparent as we go along the course. Okay, you will see more and more examples of some packets failing to reach the other side and then acknowledgements also failing to reach the other side, and what is the action taken. So once you go through these examples for the data transfer phase of this connection, it will be clear to you.
Sir?
Yes.
Sir, if in the case of a old duplicate CR packet reaching host 2, if there is already an active connection between host 1 and host 2, like host 2 probably expects host 2 probably expects a data packet with sequence field Z
That's okay.
from
Yeah,
host 1.
exactly. But if it requires another CR packet, that will not cause any harm.
So
CR
will it
packet.
close the active connection which is going on, or
No, it will not close the active connection. Why should it close?
Okay,
Why it has to be so scared to close the active connection? I mean, why does it need to treat the situation to be dangerous? See, it was closing active connections. For example, host 1 was closing active. Here there was no active connection, but it was sending a reject packet to host 2 saying I will not start an active connection because it was receiving some acknowledgement field X for which it has no record, no recent record. It is not expecting any packet from host 2 where the ACK field should have X. Host 1 also understands what host 2 is sending. So when host 1 receives an ACK segment with the ACK field set to X and it knows that in the recent past it has not proposed anything to host 2 about using X as the initial sequence value, it knows that this acknowledgement is probably either a delayed acknowledgement that was there for some old connection, or it has come because host 2 has got confused because of a delayed old duplicate. So it rejects the connection. But in the previous situation, if is your question like if host 2 receives another CR sequence equal to X, another thing exactly similar to the first one, what will be host 2's action? Is that your question?
yes, sir. Like before host 1 and host 2 release their connection, if host 2 gets another CR packet with sequence is equal to Z, then
Yeah,
what will happen?
nothing will happen. It will just ignore the segment, but it will send an acknowledgement. It will send exactly the second this acknowledgement arrow, whatever structure is shown here, back to host 1, saying that I had just now received a segment and I acknowledge I have received my next. It does not mind in repeating its answer to the same thing, just that it will not start a new connection. It will not simultaneously start two connections with the same initial sequence number with host 1. That is impossible. Then how will you differentiate between these two? If the CR segment comes from the same host 1, port numbers are same. Port number will also be the same because the CR is corresponding to the same process. IP addresses are same. The target port is also probably the same if host 2 is a server, standard port. So all the 4 tuples, okay, host 1, host 2, port 1, port 2, all 4 are same. If sequence number is also the same, they need to understand that this is a repeated CR that is coming from host 1. I will not start a new connection for this CR, but I will acknowledge that I have received it because it understands that probably host 1 is repeatedly sending the CRs after timeout because host 1 has not received its acknowledgement. That's why it has not started sending any data. It is repeatedly keeping on sending CRs. So to resolve this situation, what can host 2 do? Host 2 cannot solve the problem in the network between host 1 and host 2. That host 2 has no control over. Maximum host 2 what can do is it can help host 1 by sending a correct acknowledgement packet with a correct acknowledgement number. That's what it will do. It will again send back this acknowledgement packet and maybe this time it will reach host 1. And this time after host 1 receives it, the connection will be initialized on both the sides. And then host 1 will start sending the data. Do you understand now?
Yes, sir.
Repeated packets the way if you are using this scheme, repeated packets usually do not cause any harm. Repeated packets are ignored, but an acknowledgement is sent to it. Okay. Achha. Now, transport layer has made a promise to application layer that it will provide reliable service. Okay. So when you are in hall in the campus in normal times, so you make a promise to your parents, I will get good grades, my CGPA will be above 9. But the thing is, there's so much distraction in campus. It's a completely unreliable environment to study well to get 9 CGPA or above. But still, if you make that promise to your parents, you have to do something. Okay, do something extra. You have to put in extra effort, keep yourself isolated from all the distractions. Okay, and so that's what, so you have to put in some extra effort. One of the promises that the transport layer makes is that every single bit of information that the application layer gave me will be transferred perfectly without even a single bit flip to the receiver application process. To keep on this promise, it implements error correction schemes, or at least error detection schemes. They are not error correction, error detection schemes at least, in both the transport layer and also, interestingly, the data link layer. Now, the transport layer, network layer, data link layer, physical layer, all of these are unreliable with respect to preserving the sanctity of the bits, especially as you go more and more downwards through the network stack, it becomes more unreliable. If you go to the physical layer, these are at a level of electrical voltages over wires or fiber optics, optical signals modulated through fiber optic cables or radio waves, etc. In case of a Wi-Fi type connection, etc. This can be easily corrupted. Okay, I mean, electrical noise or electromagnetic noise is available all around. There is no way to shield it, and this can corrupt your bits. But since transport layer has made a promise that it will deliver everything perfectly, it implements error correction. And if an error is detected, the entire packet is retransmitted. Unfortunately, transport layer does not have the ability to resend only the bit or the bits that got flipped. Even if it can detect somehow that, well, only one bit out of 1000 bits that were sent was corrupted, and which bit was corrupted it detects. It cannot usually, but even if it does detect, it will again send the entire 1000 sized byte sized 1000 bit size packet at the from the sender to the receiver. That's how it works. The question is, flow controller, error controller at the transport layer is kind of essential. Okay, so just consider error control for now. Error controller transport layer is essential because it has made a promise. Question is, why does data link layer interestingly also perform sanity checking on every L2 link? Okay, at layer 2, data link layer performs sanity checking. Why? Isn't it repetition of efforts? Well, the interesting thing is that at the network layer or at the data link layer, it can only detect errors between two links. For example, the two links in between this router 2 and router 4, something like that. If the stuff gets corrupted inside the network layer, okay, by the router itself. The router strips down the packets and it kind of it plays with some parts of the data. If some mishap happens, this thing, the data link layer error correction, we will study it in detail later on. That cannot detect it, unfortunately. And what will happen in that case is that if the transport layer check is not there, incorrect data will be delivered to the receiver, although it passed every data link layer check. Okay, still incorrect data gets delivered to the it has passed the L2 layer checks, but then if there is no transport layer, so the point is that, as I said, transport layer, because it has made some special promise, it has to take some responsibility. Only data link layer checking cannot solve this problem. Okay, but now can only transport layer checking solve this problem? Well, that also is kind of wastage of effort if some problem happens in in the lower layers, L2 and L3 basically. Okay, in that case, finally it will reach the transport layer with, suppose there is no L2 layer check. It reaches the transport layer and there it is detected there is some problem. Again, it has to kind of resend the transport layer stuff from the initial till the end. So a lot of time was spent from sending the data from the beginning till the end. And this is wastage of time and wastage of computational effort also. Okay, because in between the routers process these packets, etc., which turned out to be completely useless. So this thing was kind of discussed in a paper, very influential paper called End-to-End Arguments in System Design from MIT. Anyways, that's a historical thing. We will study both the schemes, the data link layer schemes and the transport layer schemes later on. The two schemes are slightly different, so we will study them later on. Now comes the third phase of any connection, the most important phase, which is the actual data transfer between the sender and the receiver. In the analysis that we will show, the diagrams that we will show now, we will show diagrams of the form that is now visible on the slide, where you have basically one-sided connections, means only one side sends the data and only one side sends, and the receiver only sends acknowledgements, does not send any data. This is not the case in practice. The receiver also sends the data. In fact, it piggybacks the acknowledgements on the data that it sends. So together it sends data and acknowledgement later on. Okay, so suppose connection has been set up between sender and receiver, everything by three-way handshake, which we have studied. Now, actual business of sending data. Okay, sender first sends some data to receiver. Receiver sends acknowledgement. Then, as long as it takes to receive the acknowledgement, sender does not do anything. It waits till the acknowledgement reaches it to one frame that has been sent. Then it sends the next frame or next segment. I mean, it should have been segment probably. Okay. Then again, that is acknowledged. Then it sends the next segment. So something like this. If it does not receive the acknowledgement within a stipulated amount of time, the timer times out. The timer starts as soon as one frame has been sent. The timer timeouts and the frame is resent again. Okay. So this is the situation in a perfect channel, and this is the true situation in a practical noisy channel. Okay. The frames now, there can be only one outstanding frame in the connection between A and B. What is an outstanding frame? Outstanding frame means frame which is kind of on the way from A to B, which has not yet been delivered completely to B. So frame 0, say the initial sequence number is 0. It could have been anything, but 0 is given to make it easier to understand. Say sequence number is 0, then it receives acknowledgement 0. Then it sends frame 1, receives acknowledgement 1. Then sends frame 0. And again sequence number, I mean, it could have been again frame 0 also. It's not a problem. Okay, so now suppose at some stage when frame 0 is being sent, it loses on the way. And in that case, it resends frame 0 after some time. Again, acknowledgement 0 comes back. Frame 1 is say sent. Acknowledgement 1 is coming back. Okay. But if the acknowledgement gets lost on the way, A thinks that the sender thinks that, well, maybe B has not received the packet. Okay. So it resends frame 1. The bottom part of this figure, please try to understand carefully. Please. This is very important for the topics that we are going to study later on today and in the next class. The bottom part is an interesting situation where the acknowledgement has been lost, but frame 1 has been successfully delivered to B. Now, since the acknowledgement has been lost and A does not, sender does not receive the acknowledgement to it, sender does not know what is what happened. By the way, in these diagrams, the numbers, acknowledgement numbers correspond to the frame that was received, not the next expected frame. So don't get confused. So this is a different, you can note down if you want that this is slide number 38. Here the acknowledgement number numbering scheme is for the frame that has been received, not the expected frame business like we studied in previously. This is fine. That's okay. Not a problem. So now if frame 1 is received, acknowledgement 1 will come. But acknowledgement 1 gets lost in the way. A has no way of knowing whether the frame got lost or the acknowledgement got lost. So it again resends the frame. When B receives the frame, it identifies that this is the frame with the same sequence number 1. So it discards the duplicate frame. By the way, please understand that the receiver discards frames based on their sequence numbers and other information. They do not check the frame information byte by byte and compare it with previous frame to see whether it is a duplicate frame. Please, that doesn't happen. Okay, please understand that. Now, when B discards the duplicate frame, but it sends an acknowledgement 1. Can you explain what was the need of sending back this acknowledgement? It discarded the frame, it did not accept it. Why did it still send back this acknowledgement? What was the need?
It will understand that A did not receive its previously sent acknowledgement 1. So it will not be sending the next frame, like frame 2, until it receives.
Yes. So what will be the, so if yes, you are on the right track of answer. So what if B does not send an acknowledgement for a frame that is a duplicate because it has discarded the duplicate? Suppose B does not send the acknowledgement, what is its impact on A? That is my question.
It will keep sending the frame 1 again and again after every time.
Yes, very good. So if acknowledgement 1 is not sent at all by B for a duplicate frame, A still has no way of understanding what happened with frame 1 because it is not hearing anything from B suddenly. Again, it times out for frame 1, again it resends frame 1. Again, it keeps on resending frame 1, another frame 1 it receives, this time also B discards, but it keeps quiet. Then A will get stuck forever on frame 1. And after repeated n times retransmission of a frame, maybe it will give up like it was giving up during disconnect phase. It will finally say, oh, suddenly it seems B has gone down. So I will not, no point continuing with this connection anymore. But that's bad because B is alive. So this is the reason why even if frames are discarded at the receiver, it is acknowledged at the receiver by sending back to the sender some acknowledgement. It helps the sender to understand that it is okay to send the next frame. Now, how many frames or segments can be outstanding in this scheme, students?
One.
So only one frame can be outstanding in these schemes. How many bits are required to number the frames in this scheme?
So one.
One, because the sequence numbers, it's basically the same sequence number kind of. Well, you call it, I mean, two different sequence numbers probably, but 0 and 1, 1 bit is sufficient. Okay. Just to differentiate the next frame for the two consecutive frames has to be differentiated. For that, you need two different sequence numbers, so 0 and 1 with only one outstanding scheme per connection. This scheme is called the stop and wait protocol. And any general communication system where every message that is either successfully delivered now or has been successfully delivered earlier is acknowledged explicitly is called an automatic repeat requests protocol or ARQ. So the stop and wait protocol is an ARQ protocol. We will also study other ARQs. All the protocols we are going to study for TCP-like systems are ARQ. Okay. But ARQ is a class of protocols where it is acknowledged, first of all. Secondly, automatic repeat. Why does this name comes? Automatic repeat comes from the timeout and retransmission features. If a frame does not get delivered to the other side, or it is not clear whether it was delivered to the other side because no acknowledgement was received, automatically this triggers retransmission of the frame. That's why it's called automatic repeat. Request means somebody would have explicitly requested send me a frame, but no, there is no need to explicitly request because automatically a frame which has not been acknowledged for a long time will be resent. So this is an ARQ protocol. Okay.
Sir?
Yes.
So if we use just one bit to number have the sequence numbers, then would not be the probability that the frame numbers will sequence numbers will collide with any delayed duplicate will be higher.
Yes. but in that case, the question is whether the time that you allow for these frames to go go to the receiver, that has to be calculated, and accordingly you have to decide how fast you can send frames. Yes, I agree that if only 2 sequence numbers are possible, then your sequence numbers are wrapping around too fast. So it's a problem actually, and that can cause some issues at the receiver. So ARQ is not used in practice for transport layer protocols. So this, what you just said now, is probably maybe one reason, but there is also another reason. Can you, any of you say what is the other reason why stop and wait, sorry, stop and wait is there is not used, not ARQ is not used, stop and wait is not used that much. Why is it not used that much? I mean, is this, first of all, is this scheme efficient?
Probably it's very slow because there's a lot of waiting time on the sender side.
Yes. So the sender, because of this fear of, first of all, it waits for every acknowledgement, only then it resends the next packet. Secondly, there is a fear of resending packets with the same sequence number, so it will wait for a long time so that the packets die down in the network, okay, or it reaches the receiver B. So all these things means the scheme is painfully slow, primarily because it waits for the acknowledgement to come, and secondarily also because it needs to keep a band gap to be careful that it is wrapping around, sequence numbers wrapping around very fast. Okay, so this is not very practically efficient. How can we improve this? Well, there are some bombastic state diagrams here. We will go through them later on if needed. Okay. By the way, some improvements are done that please understand that this denoted effectively this denoted a unidirectional connection, kind of a half duplex connection where only one side was sending useful information, other side was only acknowledging. Actual connections is a superposition of two independent connections like this, one from A to B and the other from B to A, because B to A will also probably send data. Okay. So it is even more wastage of time, but some amount of savings are made by superposing the acknowledgements or piggybacking the acknowledgements of either side on the data they are sending. So the acknowledgement that will be sent from B to A will be piggybacked on the data that will be sent from B to A, and acknowledgement that will be sent from A to B, which is not shown here because no data here, no data flows from B to A. That will be piggybacked finally on the data which flows from A to B. Okay, intentionally these diagrams have been kept simple because it's the first time you are studying this, but in practice this will be bidirectional. Okay, so please keep that in mind. So this is not very acceptable. What to do? Well, see, in computer science, especially systems is funny business. Okay, there are not too many new grand ideas. There's very few grand ideas which work in different contexts. And one of the grand ideas is pipelining to improve performance, which originally is probably a computer architecture concept used in pipelined hardware of the microprocessors. What is the concept of pipelining? You say that, well, See, don't wait for the execution of one instruction to finish. You commit several instructions at one after the other, while there are several unfinished instructions currently in your so-called pipeline. Maybe 5, 6, 7, whatever. Okay. The version we studied in class in the last semester, the CSE students, they had 5-stage pipeline. So 5 instructions, partially completed instructions could be present in one go. And over 5 clock cycles, the instructions get executed if there are no issues with their execution, no conflicts, etc., no hazards. And finally, everything is perfect. Every clock cycle, you will get one instruction completed at the output. This is the concept of pipelining, by which it kind of gets a speed up factor of approximately equal to the n pipeline stages. It is slightly less than n in practice, but okay, ideally n if there are n pipeline stages. The concepts are kind of similar. Stop and wait protocol, one data packet will reach from host to server, then the acknowledgement will come. Here it's not like that. Pipeline, several data packets will be sent, okay, at a burst. Their acknowledgements would also come back in bursts, and those have to be processed. This is called a sliding window protocol. Okay, why sliding window? We will come to it. Now, every outbound segment will contain a sequence number from 0 to some maximum 2 power n minus 1. So some the kind of the example that we will study, the value of n will be really small, like n equal to 3, like that. So these are like 3-bit sequence numbers. Sequence numbers vary from 0 to 7, something like that. Anyways, now the sender and the receiver maintains a set of sequence numbers corresponding to frames it is permitted to send. This is called the sending window. Remember that now the sender can send several segments at one go, and the receiver can accept several segments at one go. However, this several has a limit. This limit is called the window size or window length. Okay. So look at this diagram. This is a very nice simple diagram, but very nice diagram. Here you see this black rectangular boxes. This denotes a window. Okay. And initially the window is placed over certain sequence numbers corresponding to certain segments. The window length here is 7. Okay. The window length here is 7, whereas the sequence number space is of size 8, because the sequence number varies from 0 to 7. As we will later find that for this protocol, there is a limit on the window length. The window length must be at max 1 less than the allowable maximum sequence number. Here, since the maximum allowable sequence number is 7, the window length is 7. The window length is also 7. Okay, and sorry, I mean, it's exactly equal to the maximum sequence number, because it is minus 2 power n minus 1, this kind of thing. So if this is 7, the maximum window length is also 7. It cannot be 8. If it is 8, this protocol does not work. We will see later on. So this is kind of the maximum window length allowed in this particular scheme, given its sequence number range of 0 to 7. It could have been a smaller window, but this is kind of the maximum length window. How does it work? Well, it first places this window on the allowable sequence numbers of segments that can be sent. When a segment is ready, it sends it. As soon as frame or segment, whatever is ready and it passed to it from the application layer, it sends it, if it is within the allowed sequence number. So these greens show segments which have already been sent. Okay. Then one comes, that is also sent. And as soon as stuff are sent, the window starts sliding right. Why does it start sliding right? To show that, well, no, not as soon as, sorry. I'm mistaken. Okay, sorry. So when this blue-green things show that something has been sent, but acknowledgement has not yet been received for this, but it was sent. Similarly, if it has frame 1 ready, it sends it. When it has frame 2 ready, it sends it. When it has frame 3 ready, it sends it, etc., etc. But in the meantime, after frame 2 has been sent, it has received acknowledgement for frame 0. When it receives acknowledgement for frame 0, the sender says, my business with frame 0 is over. And it slides the Windows 1 position to the right. And 0 goes out of the window. Now the segments number that are possible to be sent in the window are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Earlier 7 was outside the window. But still the total number of things in the window is also 7. That has not changed. Of this, 1 and 2 has been sent but not yet been acknowledged. 3, 4, 5 if needed can be sent. So when 3 is available, it sends it. But once 3 is available, it receives acknowledgement for frame number 1. So it slides this window 1 further to the right. So now the window spans 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and 0. 0 has come back because sequence numbers will wrap around, right? It's a 3-bit sequence number system. So it will come wrap around after 7, which is expected. Fine. Finally, when 4 is ready, it sends 4 and 2, 3, 4 go to an unacknowledged state. So now it has to remember the starting position of the sequence number of the window, the length of the window, those segments in the window which have been sent and not yet been acknowledged, and those segments in the window which are ready to be sent when available. Okay. Now let's look at the receiver, receiving window. In the receiving window, when it gets 0, it collects it. Okay. When it gets 1, it collects it. Receiving window also has the same window size. The window size actually can be proposed by the sender, I think. Later on, I think TCP will study. These window lengths can be proposed by the party which starts the connection, saying that let us have this window length. So this window length is not a constant parameter. It can change actually over time. Okay. The sequence number space is not a parameter that can change. There is a limit. Okay. TCP segment formats will define that limit. Later on we'll find. But I think the window length can be changed. That can be proposed by one party to the other, and the other party, if it agrees, it will also use similar window length. Now, in this, I don't think that it is necessary that the window length should be exactly the same at either party, but usually they are the same. Okay. So when it gets 0. It fills up its frame. When it gets 1, it fills up the frame. Once it has sent the acknowledgement for frame 0, receiver says, I am done with my business for frame 0. I will now increase, right shift my window. 0 will now go out of the window and it will occupy this position. Then 3 comes. Then it sends out the acknowledgement for 1. Then it gets rid of 1 also. Then 3 comes, 3 goes and sits in the window, but 1 goes out of the window because its business is over. then 4 comes, etc. Now this window will keep on. Why is this 2, 3, 4 in green? What does they show? Yeah, please, one of you.
The acknowledgement has not been
Yeah,
sent.
acknowledgement has not yet been sent. Okay. So once the acknowledgement is sent, the window can move to the right. Now there is also a little complication with the receiving side window. The receiving side window is basically a buffer. Okay. It denotes part of a buffer which is storing some frames which are going to be passed over to the application layer. Okay. If the buffer gets filled up, then that might create some problem in right shifting the receiving side window, but we will see that later. I think buffer is not there in today's class. Buffering issues we'll find later. So this is kind of the picture. Is this clear, students? Any question?
Sir, in this case, what about the packets if they are lost? For example, if the first acknowledgement that X0 is lost.
Yes. So
But
there
the
are
window has
two schemes for packets which are lost. We will study them in the next week's class because those are complicated schemes. There are two schemes called selective repeat and go back in. Why they have those names and what are the details we will study in the next class. This is the sliding window for 3-bit sequence number. This diagram is not that good actually. This is from Tannenbaum. You can ignore it. But essentially this shows a circular pattern of sequence numbers because sequence numbers wrap around like a clock-like diagram. And it shows sender and receiver of what is happening. That will initially, so this sliding window is of size 1 with 3-bit sequence numbers. Okay. This is size 1 sliding window, remember. So only one packet can be sent and received. Sliding window consists of only one packet, but the sequence number is up to 7. Okay, initially is this. After the first frame has been sent, 0 is outstanding. And then when 0 is received, it goes to 1. It is expecting 1. And then again, after the first frame has been sent, after the first frame has been received is C. So after first frame has been received, receiver window then goes to 1. And then after the acknowledgement to 1 has been received, the sender now moves to 1. This long arrow, long clock hand is basically showing what is going to. Segment because now the window size is 1. Only one segment can be sent out and only one segment can be received. Does this remind you of any other scheme which we studied just few minutes back? Only one segment can be sent out and only one segment can be received.
Stop and wait.
Yes, this is similar to stop and wait. This is similar to this, except one parameter. What is that parameter which is different from stop and wait for this?
Sequence numbers are not 0 and 1. They can be more
Right.
than that.
So stop and wait is a sliding window protocol with window size 1 and 1-bit sequence number. Okay. So basically you can say that stop and wait is a very simple version of sliding window protocol. Okay. Good. So you understand. Very good. So next day we will continue from what happens to sliding window protocols in noisy channels. Okay. There are two schemes, as I said, selective repeat and go back in, and we'll continue to study from there. Thank you. I'm stopping the recording now.